Has Donald Trump made yet another U-turn in his policy regarding the war in Ukraine? It certainly appears so, as his most recent statements indicate that he's back to blaming Russia and Putin for the war. But Putin does not appear too concerned with this, as he's hoping that his army will finally achieve that elusive breakthrough and break the back of the Ukrainian defenses. This is happening against the background of worsening fuel crisis in Russia due to a series of successful Ukrainian strikes on Russia's energy infrastructure. Welcome to another Kings and Generals update on the unprovoked Russian invasion of Ukraine. Do you know why thousands of people on YouTube and Patreon support us financially? Because they get history you won't find anywhere else. We release 3 new exclusive videos every week. Plus, they get perks like early access to all videos, voting rights on upcoming series and videos, access to our private Discord, our production schedule, and much more. Right now, 250 exclusive episodes are waiting for members and patrons, including from our series on the Eastern Front of World War II, Spanish War of Succession, the Punic Wars, the Pacific War, the Iberian Reconquista, the Russian Revolution and Civil War, the North African and Italian campaigns of World War II, Sicilian Wars between the Greeks and Carthaginians, and many others. By joining, you're not only unlocking rare content, you're also supporting the stories you love. Your help allows us to keep producing 3 free videos per week while paying our team competitive salaries and growing the channel. Join via the links in the description, the pinned comment, or by pressing the join button under the video. Thanks for making this possible. On the battlefield, the Russian pressure persists. A particularly threatening situation is developing near Kupiansk. Since April, the Russians have been trying to establish a foothold in Kupiansk, and they have finally succeeded in September. They once again bypassed Kupiansk from the north, advancing on Moskovka and Sobolivka. The Russian army has since established positions in the north and northwest of Kupiansk, on one occasion using their tactic of infiltrating the Ukrainian rear positions by utilizing gas pipes. Battles are ongoing in central Kupiansk at this moment. The Russians have also made progress in the Lyman-Siversk sector, and have captured most of the Serebryansky forest, a contested area since late 2022. They have also continued their advance on the flanks of Lyman, reaching Novoselivka and Yampil in September. Controlling Lyman is crucial for Russia's objective of eventually capturing the Donbas fortress belt. The Russian army is already approaching its southern point, Kostiantynivka. Capturing Lyman would be a crucial step towards attacking the northern tip of the fortress belt Sloviansk-Kramatorsk. The most curious situation is currently developing north of Minahrad. In August, the Russians made a breakthrough towards Dobropillia, which threatened the collapse of the whole Ukrainian defense in this area. However, a determined Ukrainian counterattack has since created a fluid situation in this salient. The Ukrainians have taken back some ground here. The most optimistic pro-Ukrainian commentators even talk about 3 separate cauldrons or encirclements that the Ukrainian army has trapped the invading force in. However, not everyone agrees with this overly optimistic interpretation of the situation. Elements of the Russian 51st and 8th Combined Arms Armies were strengthened by elements of the 76th VDV Division, 40th, 155th and 177th Naval Infantry Brigades, and the 39th Motor Rifle Brigade. According to the prominent Ukrainian military blogger Konstantin Mashevets, the Russians are not only defending here to salvage the situation between Novoekonomicha and Zoloty Kolodiez, but are also attacking towards Krasny Liman, Novoekonomichne, Rudinska and Rysin Yar with the aim of expanding their salient and relieving their forces. He claimed the Russians are not only holding Kucherev Yar, but they have a supply line into this locale. Meanwhile, the Ukrainians are attempting to capture chokeholds between Mayak and Nikhanhirivka, while also counterattacking towards Volodymyrivka, Pankivka, Rezina and other areas. Hence, by late September, the situation in the Dobropillia sector had become too fluid and unpredictable to reach any definitive conclusions. On the Novopavlivka-Hilyapola line, the Russians have been making their most steady progress in recent months, and this trend continued in September. The Russian army has already gained a foothold in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. At this point, Russia has not laid a political claim to this region, but the further it advances, the more leverage it would gain from this situation, as an eventual bargaining tool if nothing else. In our previous video, we discussed new tactics the Russian army is currently employing to minimize personnel and equipment losses. They are now primarily using small infantry units, including small motorcycle units, to infiltrate the Ukrainian rear without being detected by drones. Once they gain a foothold, the infiltration group tries to locate and eliminate the Ukrainian drone operators to basically blind the Ukrainian defense in the area. Eventually, more groups join the initial infiltration group and attack the Ukrainian positions from several directions. According to the Institute for the Study of War, this has enabled Russia to reduce its casualties. This is even confirmed by the Russian casualty figures reported by the Ukrainian General Staff, which were between 32 and 48,000 in the first 6 months of 2025 and decreased to 29,000 in August and 13,000 in the first half of September. Although the official recruitment rates from Russia decreased in 2025, the lower casualty rates have enabled them to increase their manpower in Ukraine and reportedly start creating a strategic reserve in the rear. Having said that, the dropping recruitment is causing some degree of unease in the Russian pro-war community, as more and more voices call for another round of mobilization. This would be a politically unpopular decision for Putin, hence for the time being, the Russian government continues to rely on recruitment via signing of contracts, which is becoming more and more costly for the Russian budget. Russia is also reportedly modifying its tactics of drone use on the battlefield. Previously, the main target of Russian FPV drones was Ukrainian defenses, vehicles, and artillery systems. They have also now started targeting Ukraine's logistics. The Russian drone operators are increasingly using fiber optic drones, which are not affected by electronic warfare jamming. This is causing supply problems for the Ukrainians, as they now increasingly rely on smaller vehicles traveling at night for their frontline logistics. The former commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian army, Valery Zaluzhny, offered interesting insights into the use of drones on the battlefield, which largely reiterate the points we just mentioned regarding Russian tactics. He stated that the prevalence of drones on the battlefield prevents the sides from gathering a large number of troops near the front line. This forces them, particularly the Ukrainians, to operate their defenses in small autonomous units. As a result, the Russians managed to infiltrate the Ukrainian rear with small groups thanks to the gaps between Ukrainian units. Moreover, drones create 20-kilometer deep kill zones on the front lines, disrupting logistics and preventing the massing of troops in the immediate rear of both sides. This has led to the gradual disappearance of such a concept as the rear, because enemy fire control makes it very difficult to have second echelons and reserves for the forward units. The Russians also continue their relentless campaign of missile and drone attacks against Ukrainian cities, and the scale of these attacks grows every month, as the Russians expand their production of Shahed-like drones. On September 7th, they launched their biggest air attack of this war so far. 810 Shahed-type drones and 13 missiles targeted Kyiv, Sumy, Dnipro, Zaporizhia, Chernihiv, and other cities. The building of the Cabinet Ministers of Ukraine, which is inside the most well-defended area of the country, was considerably damaged by Russian drones. Here the goal is crystal clear: putting additional pressure on the Ukrainian government to force it to submit to Russian demands. Ukraine retaliated with a series of strikes on Russian assets in Crimea, along with continuing its campaign of striking Russian energy infrastructure, particularly its oil refineries. According to the Izvestia newspaper, these strikes have caused gasoline shortages in more than 10 regions across Russia, including Ryazan, Saratov, Nizhny Novgorod, and Rostov Oblast, as well as occupied Crimea. These shortages lead to long queues at gas stations, the closure of some stations, and price hikes. The Russian government has responded by implementing a partial ban on diesel exports and extending the ban on certain gasoline exports. Zelensky has already called this strike campaign the most effective sanctions, the sanctions that work the fastest, as Kyiv's goal is to make sure that the war is felt more closely for ordinary Russians at home, while also making a dent in Russia's oil-related revenues. This appears even more important given the signs of economic problems Russia has started to experience. We discussed them in more detail in our previous video, but a few additional symptoms appeared in September. According to Reuters, the defense spending in the 2026 Russian state budget will drop to $150 billion from $160 billion in 2025. Of course, it is not a huge decrease. Still, given that Putin has no intention to stop the war in the foreseeable future, it is curious that they have to lower their war spending next year, which may indicate economic challenges. On top of that, the Russian Finance Ministry announced a 2% increase in value-added tax. Again, not a huge deal in the grand scheme of things, but certainly may be a symptom of deeper problems, especially if this trend persists. We also need to examine Donald Trump's statements in this regard. Trump claims that Putin and Russia are in big economic trouble, calling on the Europeans to stop buying Russian oil to exert additional pressure. He promised to impose serious sanctions on Russia whenever Ukraine's allies follow his advice. For now, Trump has already imposed tariffs on India to dissuade it from buying Russian oil, but this has not stopped India nor China from doing that. As long as India and China continue buying energy from Russia, it is hard to envision Russia's economy taking a nosedive, at least in the immediate future. Energy and trade cooperation with these two countries, along with the continued gas sales to Europe, has been instrumental for Putin's ability to wage war in Ukraine. China's cooperation with Russia goes beyond that, as Beijing has been supplying Moscow with technology and resources to manufacture weapons. Of course, one should not forget about Iran's close cooperation with Russia. The supply of Shahed drones and the transfer of the related technology to Russia have enabled the Kremlin to continue terrorizing Ukrainian cities. Then there is North Korea, which has also been a huge help for Putin. The German Friedrich Naumann Foundation estimated that North Korea has supplied Russia with up to $9.8 billion worth of weapons, including almost 7 million artillery shells, more than 1 million mortar shells, almost 900,000 MLRS rockets, 248 ballistic missiles, and almost 900 artillery systems. That is on top of some 15,000 North Korean soldiers, who played an important role in the Battle of Kursk. Meanwhile, Ukraine continues receiving aid from its allies. According to Reuters, the Pentagon has approved 2 previously announced shipments of weapons, each valued at $500 million, consisting of Patriot missiles and HIMARS ammunition, among other items. The Pentagon has also announced a $26 million contract awarded to Lockheed Martin to provide F-16-related support to Ukraine. However, the most significant news from across the pond came from Trump and Zelensky's meeting on the sidelines of the UN on September 23rd. At a press conference following the meeting, Trump was very complimentary of Ukraine's resistance against Russia, like never before. In a subsequent tweet, in a marked departure from his previous rhetoric, Trump called Russia a paper tiger, stating that Ukraine is capable of restoring its full territorial sovereignty with the help of NATO and the EU, further committing to selling weapons to Ukraine. There are 2 interpretations of this shift in Trump's rhetoric. One is that the US president is tired of Putin's imitation of diplomacy and is now backing Ukraine to force Putin to negotiate. Another one is that Trump further distances himself from active participation in this war and pushes the burden of supporting Ukraine onto NATO and the EU. But more importantly, Zelensky and Trump discussed the supply of Tomahawk missiles. Previously, Zelensky floated this idea to Biden, who flat out refused to consider it. Now, according to Vice President Vance, the United States is considering it, with the final decision pending Trump's approval. We do not know which variations of the Tomahawk missile are being considered, nor whether the Americans will actually agree to supply them. But if they do, the Ukrainians will get their most potent and destructive long-range strike asset. At this point, arguably, Ukraine's biggest equalizer against Russia's advantage in firepower and manpower is its long-range strike capability, enabling it to damage Russia's economy and military infrastructure. If provided in sufficient numbers, Tomahawks would multiply this impact. In another significant development from this meeting, the Wall Street Journal reports that Zelensky informed Trump about a planned Ukrainian counteroffensive. Again, there are no details about when, where, or how, which is probably a good thing given that practically everyone knew everything about Ukraine's 2023 counteroffensive. The only detail reported by the WSJ is that Zelensky has requested intelligence assistance from Trump. For now, nothing more is known about a claimed future Ukrainian operation, and one can doubt that it will actually take place, given Kyiv's manpower shortages on the battlefield. It would be prudent to wait for further information to gain a clearer picture of this matter. To go back to foreign aid delivered and promised to Ukraine, on September 9th, the German corporation Rheinmetall confirmed the signing of a contract on the delivery of Skyranger air defense systems, designed to counter drones. In separate news, the German Defense Minister, Pistorius, stated that Germany was close to supplying 2 Patriot air defense systems to Ukraine, along with committing a further €300 million to help Ukraine's long-range drone production. On September 10th, the United Kingdom pledged to produce thousands of interceptor drones for Ukraine to counter the Shahed threat. In September, Sweden delivered 18 new Archer howitzers, artillery shells, air defense equipment, and other weapons and assets worth $836 million. In late September, Zelensky stated that Israel had sent a Patriot system in August and will send 2 more this fall. This is the first confirmed delivery of weapons or equipment in this war by Israel. The EU has pledged to provide €6 billion from interest earned on frozen Russian assets to support Ukraine's domestic drone production. Along with that, numerous European countries have committed to purchasing weapons from the United States for Ukraine. Russia has never been happy about the Western military aid to Ukraine and has been trying different political, propaganda, and sabotage methods to prevent it. Apparently, they are also very angry about a series of Ukrainian strikes on their assets in Crimea, which has prompted them to push their retaliation on Europe. At least this is what a Russian diplomat told his European counterparts, according to Bloomberg. In September, Russian jets and drones violated the airspace of Poland, Romania, Estonia and Denmark on several occasions. Although the Russians have officially denied their involvement and tried to blame the Ukrainian electronic warfare systems for this blatant provocation was carried out by the Russians without a doubt, and all affected European governments and their allies have confirmed this. Their reaction has been a combination of measures. Poland shot down some of the drones entering their airspace. In other cases, European jets intercepted Russian air assets. On September 12th, NATO announced the Eastern Sentry Operation, dedicating additional assets to its eastern border. There are unconfirmed reports that Denmark has called up hundreds of reservists in response to these provocations. This is not the first time the Russians have conducted similar provocations against Europe, but such regular and systemic incursions happened for the first time since the start of the war. The Russians are pushing the boundaries of NATO and Europe, trying to find out where exactly the limit is. So, while on the battlefield in Ukraine we are largely seeing more of the same, the international dimension of the war is acquiring new threatening aspects for global peace. Russia keeps scaring the world with its nuclear arsenal to deter the Europeans from shooting down their jets, and even contemplating the creation of a no-flight zone over at least the border areas of Ukraine to prevent Russian jets and drones from making incursions into the EU and NATO territory. It is the same old Russian tactic of pushing the limits, provoking the other side, and then threatening them with severe consequences, in case the other side considers retaliating. Lastly, let's examine the visually documented equipment losses suffered by both parties as of September 30th, courtesy of the Oryx blog. Russia has lost at least 4,146 tanks, 10,203 vehicles, 303 command posts and communication stations, 2,183 artillery systems and vehicles, 166 aircraft, and 163 helicopters. Ukraine has lost at least 1,279 tanks, 5,153 vehicles, 67 command posts and communication stations, 1,019 artillery systems and vehicles, 111 aircraft and 52 helicopters. Further updates on the Russian invasion of Ukraine are on the way. If you don't want to miss them, make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see them. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting and sharing. It helps immensely. Our patrons and YouTube members can watch more than 200 exclusive videos. Join their ranks via the link in the description or by pressing the join button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.